And now Bethany Funk has been subpoenaed by Brian Kohberger's defense, seemingly, while the defense hasn't expressly stated that the purpose of that deposition that they seek from Bethany Funk is for exculpatory evidence to, for Brian Kohberger, the suspect arrested in these crimes. However, that is what has been inferred by the Brian Kohberger's defense counsel, is that Bethany Funk will have her testimony will yield the results that Brian Kohberger is innocent.
Okay, well, yeah, there's something unusual about that. Now, what about the two surviving roommates there? Have they retained counsel?
I believe Bethany Funk has, yes, but I'm not sure about Dylan Mortensen. Now, Dylan Mortensen, well, one more note on the initial press conferences I think is interesting with these roommates. The media had a lot of questions. So one of the questions from a local reporter was, were these roommates held hostage? Or they said, were these witnesses? And the Moscow PD said, no, they're not witnesses. And then the next logical question, out of confusion from one of the reporters, was, well, were they hostages? And then they said, Moscow PD said, no, not hostages. Now, this is one instance of numerous instances where Moscow PD makes a public statement such as, no, the surviving roommates were not witnesses, and then later take action that contradicts that statement, where now Dylan Mortensen, the other surviving roommate, is apparently a witness. She's the individual who allegedly witnessed the intruder in her home wearing all black and having bushy eyebrows, and this was largely publicized in media reports to kind of frame suspect Kohberger in the court of public opinion, which there's been a lot of that stuff that has been false, but nonetheless, that's one of the main things that was largely populated through every media outlet was, surviving roommates saw the suspect Kohberger in the home, and she identified him by his bushy eyebrows, and that's, I mean, it's a stretch of the imagination, kind of in and of itself, the narrative of this roommate seeing this individual, never seeing a knife. As you pointed out, Ed, it was supposedly a silent murder because she didn't hear anything except for someone whispering and a dog barking. But if she's hearing a whisper and a dog barking, how is she not hearing her three roommates, and one of her roommates' boyfriends being brutally murdered in the middle of the night?
They had a dog, huh? Okay.
They had a dog. Yep.
All right. Man's best friend, right?
It was a golden doodle, one of those kind of fancy.
Okay, that's not a real dog. Okay. Okay, so then how did the police come about how did Kohberger come to their attention?
That's a great question, and I honestly don't think it's fully been vetted out through any of the public filings and statements and affidavits that have been filed. But I can give you let's start that at the end and walk it backwards to how they got to Kohberger. So on December 30th of 2022, it was, on every media outlet that morning, the Pennsylvania authorities, allegedly along with the FBI, had stormed a house in the early morning hours in the eastern side of Pennsylvania, in the Pocono Mountain area of Pennsylvania. And that was Brian Kohberger, the suspect in custody and being tried for these crimes. That was his parents' house. He was there on holiday vacation from his professor job. He was a doctoral student, so he was doing TA work and getting his doctorate degree in criminal justice at Washington State University, 5 miles away from Moscow. So he was home on vacation for the holidays, and the Pennsylvania authorities and FBI stormed his home and took him into custody. So that's how he got arrested. Now, he allegedly, how they got tipped off to suspect Kohberger, the authorities in Idaho, that is there was a knife sheath that was allegedly located, and I stress allegedly here simply because no one agrees on precisely where the knife sheath was found, except for it was found in and around two of the victims' bodies in the third floor bedroom of the home in Moscow, Idaho. Now, in their own reports of the authorities in Idaho, there is zero. It's all very ambiguous. There's no clear indication of when this was taken into custody, this piece of evidence, who took it into custody, and then the chain of custody only continues to get even more dubious after those events. But even in the responding officer statements, no one is in clear agreement of when this knife sheath was discovered or where precisely it was discovered. And the DNA evidence allegedly recovered from the snap of the knife sheath is what ultimately led law enforcement to Brian Koberger through this genetic DNA investigation that they allegedly conducted, and using the Idaho State Crime Lab, then using who didn't find anything, then going to a third party who may or may not have found any DNA evidence, this private DNA lab out of Texas named Othram Labs. And then they allegedly, because the story has shifted a couple times here in the attempts for the state to remove this evidence from discovery to the defendant and block any access to this information. So then it allegedly went to the FBI, and as the story goes right now, the FBI is the one who located the quote-unquote touch DNA evidence on the snap of the knife sheath.
So the police have the knife sheath. They discovered DNA on the knife sheath, and using various databases, both public and private, they somehow connect that to the family of Koberger.
Yes, that's correct. So let me close the loop on that one for you. So on the prior to the assault on Koberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania, an unidentified party, could be the Pennsylvania State Police, could be the FBI. It's not clear at this time. Apparently accessed private property in the gated community, went into the trash can of Brian Koberger's parents' trash can at the home, recovered allegedly his father's DNA, and used that as the baseline in their comparison for backtracking to Koberger. But the ultimate question begins is, how did they get to Koberger in the first place? And they try, and because I think you can agree with me, the whole we'll get his father's DNA and see if it's not this guy, that's not exactly a manner in which they reasonably got to Koberger as a suspect, but it is how they allegedly confirmed him as the perpetrator of the crimes.
But wasn't there something too about his car?
Yeah, so that was more the confirmation. So now the ambiguity surrounding the white Elantra, so that's now allegedly how the law enforcement got to suspect Koberger, and there's great question in regard to that entire piece of their investigation, largely because the authorities, both the Idaho authorities and the FBI, have made conflicting statements on the analysis of the car they were looking for, and just turns out that they weren't even looking for the car that Koberger had, because the car that the authorities had claimed to be looking for in a press conference on December 7th of 2022, announcing to the public they wanted every tip on this 2011 to 2014 white Hyundai Elantra. So if you're looking for 2011 to 2014 and you're announcing it to the public, you're going to get a lot of tips about that, and they did. They got tens of thousands of tips, apparently. In fact, the FBI had to start a whole new call center to help out, as the story goes. However, that happened on December 7th. Now, after suspect Koberger was arrested on December 30th, it's easy to go back and look at the arresting affidavits and compare it to the previous actions in the case and the previous public statements. And turns out on November, according to the authorities' filings, on November 27th, I believe, might have been the 28th of 2022, suspect Koberger was identified as a suspect in this case via his 2015 white Elantra. So if they're identifying him as a suspect on the 28th, according to their statements made after the arrest, however, weeks prior to the arrest, they're asking the public for assistance in locating an Elantra that does not meet the physical or the description of the suspect's vehicle.
And what's the difference in the two Elantras?
Well, it seems that in large part that there's an extra, as a result of some federal legislation requiring daytime running lights, et cetera. There was some vents on the lower kind of front fender of the earlier models than 2015, which is what Koberger owned. But he had a model that had the daytime running lights instead of the little vent on the front fender. So especially at nighttime with additional set of headlights, it should be pretty clear indicator what making, or at least if it's a white Elantra, being the FBI analyst who identified this suspect's vehicle. So that's who according to the authorities' filings and affidavits and documents, it was an FBI analyst who identified the 2011, 2014 white Elantra, which is again what was asked of the public to assist with in the tips on December 7th. However, again, according to the documents, that same analyst then later reanalyzed the same video that helped him determine no, it was a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, but that didn't occur until after they arrested Koberger.
Okay, so the FBI had some kind of video, and they identified this 2015 Elantra, and then
After the fact, right.
Right.
They initially said it was 2011, 2014.
2014.
Then they arrest Koberger, and they said, oh, no, we were wrong. It was a 2015.
Okay. All right, that's not a lot to hang your hat on. They're 1 year off, but okay.
Well,
okay.
I think it's this again. I think the strongest indicator there in the analysis is if they're nighttime videos and one car has 4 headlight lamps on the front end and the other car has 2. I think it's a clear indicator.
Right, but have you seen that video with his 4 on one and 2 on the other?
No, but I'm saying that's what it should indicate based upon the.
No, as a good defense investigator, that's what you're hoping, man.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
You know?
But it's a good question about the video because even Koberger's defense has not had an opportunity to see the full video used to allegedly identify the car because one of the statements that was made in the defense counsel's recent filings was basically lambasting the state's case up and down, left and right, which, that is their job, so they should be doing that. But one of the statements the defense counsel made was the video that was produced to them in discovery was at the wrong time in the wrong location and clearly did not show the suspect's vehicle. So it seems there's more games being played with access to this alleged evidence that was used to get Brian Koberger in the first place, because again, the public statements on their face make no sense why Moscow PD would be asking the public for help. Let's set aside the headlights for a second and table that aspect of it. But 9 days after the fact that they've allegedly already identified their suspect, they're asking for the public's assistance in looking for this suspect in this vehicle. It just doesn't make a lot of sense on its face. Is kind of what I boil that aspect down to of the case.
And when is the trial date?
The trial date is coming up in October as of right now, but they're still hammering out discovery, so I certainly would expect that to be delayed. And
what is the prosecution's defense of this, the wrong video? What's the response to that? Because that happens.
Yeah, they don't. That's a good question. They don't really have a great response. So they just basically keep trying to say that any of this evidence that the defense is seeking is not going to be relevant to the case. That's really what they're trying to hang their hat on. So, for example, the touch DNA evidence from the snap of the knife sheath, their contention with why they don't have to produce any of the names of the labs and the personnel who processed it, their training requirements, that sort of thing, and the background of the individuals who had. Were involved in this chain of custody of this evidence. They claim that none of this is relevant to the defense. None of it's going to be relevant to the prosecution of suspect Koberger, and as a result, they're not going to use that in the trial. So, I think that is a glaring look inside the weight of that evidence, and again, the validity of that evidence, because that obviously is their key piece of evidence. The nexus point tying Brian Koberger, the suspect, to the victims and the crime scene is this knife sheath with this touch DNA evidence. And they can write whatever they want to in a report about White Elantras, but on its face, this is their strongest piece of evidence, compared to any kind of video or alleged.
Right, but the prosecution is saying they're not going to use that evidence.
Yeah, they're saying we don't need it. We have enough evidence without it, and you're not going to ever see that stuff. That's what they're telling the defense, correct?
Okay. All right. Well, if they're not going to use it, they don't have to turn it over.
That's true, and that's what the state continues to do in this back and forth boondoggle of motions for discovery that have been going on for about 3 months. And I do think some of that again, I tend to attribute a lot of that to the state wanting to hide more of this stuff up because, as I assert, Brian Koberger is not their guy. I mean, the evidence seems to support that in every regard. And as far as the state doing everything they can to ensure this is never made public, I think the state would have been happy with Brian Koberger pleading guilty the moment he stepped off a plane from Pennsylvania, but instead he did not. In fact, he's remained silent, exercising essentially his Fifth Amendment right since that date. And he does seem to have some defense counsel that seems interested in proper justice in this matter. But in regard to the knife sheath, some more very dubious circumstances surrounding that knife sheath occurred over in Whitman County, Washington, or just across the border where Washington State University is, where Koberger was a student. Because after his arrest, there was a search warrants, obviously, to go search his office on the campus, his apartment on the campus. And in those search warrants, the Whitman County prosecutor's office told the judge, do not pay any attention to this knife sheath or the alleged DNA evidence from the knife sheath because we have probable cause without it. Probable cause to go search the apartment. So for some reason, it seemed that the Whitman County prosecutor's office was not big on attaching their name to this alleged DNA evidence in the knife sheath.